What if you got the opportunity to undo your greatest mistake?
Wonder with us.
Cue the music.
I'm Bethany,
I am still Connor,
and this is Wonder with Us.
and as you may have guessed, it is still a podcast.
We're still talking about the Twilight Zone.
But we got a new episode.
Yep. Episode 18.
Yeah, we need to fix the notes, because in all the notes we have the hypothetical before the episode title, and
I
that
know.
just doesn't feel right.
We go into, well, yeah, and we do it differently too.
I don't know what you're talking about. We've never changed anything.
Okay, so you got a hypothetical for me? Or
Before
should
we
I?
even get to it? Yeah.
All right.
So, not in the annoying narrator opening voice. What if... Sorry, let me try that again. That was too much like the irritating opener. So, what if...
Take 3.
All right. What if...
I like it.
I don't, but we'll go with it. What if you found yourself... I don't even know how to pose this in such a way that isn't ridiculous sounding.
Well, I mean, it's a ridiculous episode if you think about it.
I mean, I don't know if it's any more ridiculous than any other episode. It's certainly not any less ridiculous than some of them.
It's wonderfully absurd.
It is wonderfully Twilight Zone. So let's go with, because I don't expect you to take flight
No.
in the Royal
Not
Air
in-
Corps
Not
anytime
in
soon.
reality, no.
So what if you got in your car, and as you were driving to work, you drove through a dense cloud of fog,
That happens on most mornings.
and when you came out the other side, it was 2029.
That's never happened. That would be weird. Would I see vehicles, or would they be flying by that point, you think?
9 years from now,
It could happen.
people are still talking about re-electing Trump. We're not advancing that fucking far.
Well, I mean, they're, like, we're on iPhone, 25 now?
I have no idea. I use Android because mine's 32 years old and still functioning. Go Samsung.
We don't use Apple phones. That was probably a bad example, but
It's certainly not one I can't yes and that one.
I think I would only figure out that it was 2029 if I had actually, like, stopped and talked to somebody.
Well, yeah.
In this episode, he had visuals to go along with that. So unless I could see something out my car
Oh, for
window-
fuck's sake. What if you're driving to work, you drive through a thick cloud of fog, you come out the other side and you're living in the fucking Jetsons. There's flying cars all around, there's a robotic dog, and your car is 97 years old.
9 years from now. Okay, I'll roll with it. Yeah, I would probably find a human just to talk to if humans still exist and they weren't replaced by a bunch of androids. And then I would talk to a human and figure out where I was and how to fix it. I would rethink my past and figure out if I could just, like, turn the car around and drive back through the cloud, and maybe that would fix it, because that apparently solved some problems in this episode.
It certainly seemed to. What's this episode?
As I said before, episode 18. It's called The Last Flight. It originally aired February 5th, 1960.
Directed by William Claxon, which I think is a first-timer here, with 89 total credits to his directing name. He is best known for, obviously, he's got the big three, which I am still suggesting we rename as a member of the Pantheon.
Sure. Is that to avoid actually naming the big three?
Yes.
Okay.
Ideally, yes. But also well known for Half Past Midnight in 1948, Desire in the Dust in 1960, and Night of the Lepus in 1972. And please feel free to correct me if I mispronounce that, because I don't know what the hell that word is.
It looks like lepus to me.
It's like somebody screwed up typing leper.
Now let's see if I can get this right. The big three, for people who may not know: Gunsmoke, Bonanza, and The Twilight Zone?
Yes. I
Okay.
think so.
We
It's
had a
probably
big-
changed since. Jesus, why is my microphone spiking so hard? I'm gonna fix that real quick. Give me 1 second to just turn myself down so I stop clipping. I believe that is correct, although it may have changed over the last 17 episodes.
Whatever the case may be, most of the people are reoccurring faces on Gunsmoke, Bonanza, and The Twilight Zone.
It is not abnormal. Oh, hello there, Pupperdoo. How you doing under the table making noises? All right, where I turned off my notes. There we go.
So, this episode was not written by Rod Serling. It was actually written
not.
by Richard Matheson.
I prefer Rochard, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Jumping
We could
ahead
call
of
him
myself.
Doc for short.
Richard Matheson wrote this, and
That was a dick joke.
none of
No
that.
credit for that dick joke. Okay.
None of that. None
All right,
of
that was a perfect joke, but
Not for this audience.
yet again, my perfection goes unappreciated.
So I did find a note from the writer regarding this episode. And this is something to kind of think about as we go through it, and then more so when we get to our final thoughts and give you guys some food for thought. He explained that both the title and the story of this episode refer to the protagonist, in this case Lieutenant Decker's physical journey that he took in his airplane, and also his departure from cowardice, from just being a coward, his decision ultimately to go back and rectify where he feels like he messed up.
Which we will get a little further into later on. We got edited by Joseph Gluck and photography by the classic, the great George T. Clemens, back again.
The art director was George W. Davis alongside William Ferrari, not
Hell of a
associated with the vehicle.
Did we confirm that?
We did.
Oh, okay.
We
Well,
did.
that's disappointing.
Yeah, there's no relation there. I mean, only in name. The music was again by our favorite Bernard Herrmann.
He's back. He ain't going nowhere. He still needs a nickname.
I know. We'll figure it out. And we'll get into the cast. Kenneth Haight played the role of Lieutenant Terence Decker. He was born March 25th, 1931 in Yorkshire, England. He died February 4th, 2018 in London, England. He was 87 years old. He started his career on the British stage, and he was most notable for his original interpretation of the character Jemmy Porter in John Osborne's 1956 play Look Back in Anger. And interesting fact about him, he set a precedence in British theater by coining the angry young man trope that is well known among, I guess, male stage actors of that time, and that trope continues on. People reference it in stage. He went on to perform that role on Broadway, but then saw the lead role, that role, passed on to someone else for the 1957 film adaptation. He's also known for his role of Joe Lambton in the 1970 series Man at the Top and the film adaptation of the same name in 1973. He has a total of 85 credits.
Fair play. Moving on, we have Alexander Skirby, who played Major General George Harper,
There's a tongue twister.
born November 13th, 1913 in Brooklyn, New York. Sorry about that. Died February 22nd, 1985 in Newtown, Connecticut?
Connecticut, yeah.
Okay, well, I don't ever look at... I regularly forget that Connecticut's a state. He was 72 years old. One of the industry's most distinguished voices, certainly at the time. Several roles on stage, radio, TV, film, and audio cassettes. Had 127 credits to his name. He started vocal training in Shakespearean roles on stage in the 1930s and moved to dramatic radio serials in the 40s, known primarily as the voice of the Bible, his most long-term audio narration role. He got his start in film at the age of 39, playing... I'm not going to pretend to know what that word is.
Pretty
Villainous
suave,
roles.
Suave villainous role.
Yep, what she said. in the film noir genre, starting with Affair in Trinidad alongside Rita Hayworth and Glenn Ford in 1952. He went on to do 14 films nearly back-to-back between 1952 and 1959. In between films, he guest starred in numerous TV series, including Rawhide, Bonanza.
Yeah.
I expected you to say that we should add Rawhide to the
we should. Then
to
it
the
would
list,
be. Then it would be a quad. Then we're closer to a pantheon.
We are closer to a pantheon at that point. And Alfred Hitchcock presents, along with the Twilight Zone. He continued on to daytime soap operas like General Hospital and Another World. Stayed active in the industry until he died of a heart attack in 1985.
I imagine all of that work would lead to a heart attack.
I can only assume.
As I read, as I was doing some research on this, in those 14 films, he was often filming two films at a time, and then he would go in between the sets to do his lines, and then furthermore, when he would finish up and wrap up for that day, he would go and guest star in a TV series. He was doing this all the time. Crazy.
Well, that's the kind of schedule that'll kill you.
But I mean, you know, his roles and appearances, and certainly all of those credits, you know, it meant something.
Yeah, so he left a mark.
Simon Scott played the role of Major Wilson. He was born on September 21st in 1920 in Monterey Park, California. Did that change? Then was there a name change? Was it always Monterey Park? Because I've only heard of Monterey.
I've heard of Monterey Bay. I've heard of Monterey. I've never heard of Monterey Park, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
I mean, it was the 1920s. Who's to say? He died December 11th, 1991 in Los Alamitos, California. He was 71, and he has a whopping 143 credits. He's known for The Wild Wild West in 1965.
And that is the TV series, obviously.
Yeah.
No, nothing to do with Will Smith there, folks.
Right. That timeline doesn't work out. Markham in 1959 and something called Mod Squad in 1968. He was primarily, he was primarily a TV actor.
Fair enough. And then we move on to Robert Warwick, who played the role of Air Vice Marshal Alexander McKay, born October 9, 1878. Woof. In Sacramento, California, died June 6th in 1964 in Los Angeles, California. Sorry about that. Had 250 credits in his career.
Highest credits so far.
Certainly in this episode, although I don't know if it's the highest we've seen. It's definitely close to it if it's not.
It's pretty up there.
Yeah. Went from stage to silent film to TV, known for the 1932 film So Big in... Okay. Well done, Connor. Known for the 1932 film So Big, the 1938 The Adventures of Robin Hood, and In a Lonely Place in 1950 with the date at the end.
Sorry about that. That's a formatting thing. My bad.
It's a formatting. You can't just throw the date in front of the title. That'll fuck up everything I do here.
Consistency is important. So this guy, if you talk about the span of his career and what he's done with his 250 credits, he actually went from stage pre-television, pre-recorded anything, to the silent films. And then into TV and Technicolor. Well, I don't think he made it quite to Technicolor, but nonetheless, to go from stage to silent film, he went from pre-TV era in the early 1900s all the way through, 250 credits. It's amazing.
So he might be one of the first. I don't remember having anybody on here so far that was born in the 18.
There might have been a writer or something, somebody of the crew, maybe not cast, in a previous episode. But yeah, as far as somebody who has a part as an actor in the Twilight Zone, no, I think he might be one of the first.
No. Now, to be fair, I mean, even in this episode, he is already
very old
enough to be playing a damn near retired
And I
Air Marshal, so.
read a fun fact about him when he got later in his career, like in the 50s, because he continued. He was one of those that also continued to act until he died. And in the 50s, he was sort of typecast as like either a military personnel or like an old fatherly figure, like because of his age and because of what he had done. It was
And
more or
because of his
less
face.
like a
He had
role
a
of
face for it.
He was given roles of respect because, I mean, come on. He's very old.
Alrighty, so what does IMDb have to say about this episode?
IMDb says a World War I British fighter pilot lands in an American Air Force base in France 42 years into the future.
Now, based on that alone, and based on no information other than that, would you watch this episode?
I'd give it a shot. Just because of the juxtaposition of the info that they've given us. Like somebody from World War I lands 42 years into the future. They're no longer in combat. I'd want to see that.
Yeah, I think if I could go back to having not seen, I would probably give it a go based on that description. I mean, it's hard to say. It would depend on the mood that I'm in.
Sure.
But I think I would.
Yeah, they did it good time. They did it good this time. Wow.
They did it good time. That is the most sexual thing that's been said on this show.
Oh, we have to stop recording late.
It'll certainly make things go a little smoother. Now, speaking of things that are smooth.
Okay.
Ad break. We'll be back in a minute. We are back. I hope you enjoyed the ad. I'm sure it was delightful, and I'm sure that we said nice things about our sponsor for this episode, because that's what we do.
Yep.
Now, going into the plot synopsis as we see it on this episode, I feel the need to preface. And that preface is it's not going to be a super popular opinion for some people. It's not going to be a super funny thing. It's really just a difficult episode to talk about. Not because it's bad, because it's not a bad episode, and it has one of my favorite endings of all of the episodes in the Twilight Zone, but there is very little interesting to talk about when it comes to Hollywood representation of a military anything.
Yeah.
Because we're not talking about a war movie that dumped hundreds of thousands of dollars into researching things at all.
This was done on a local set.
This was done on a local set, or it may have actually not been a local set. I think it was at an
It was a working Air Force base.
Air Force base, yeah. But whatever the case may be, it was done super locally on a budget. They definitely had somebody come in and probably said something like, hey, he shouldn't be wearing that Rolex if he's from 40 fucking years ago, whatever the case may be. But there's just not a lot of super fun and interesting things to talk about when it comes to a Hollywood representation of the military. I could not sit here and talk to you about the actual military with any kind of interest, let alone Hollywood's depiction of it in 1960.
Right. And they probably had like an informant or somebody who was aware of how this works to give them advice on the episode. I'm sure that was a thing.
That makes sense.
But
it doesn't help the interest factor.
Right. And having done the research on this episode and like making all the notes and everything, 90% of it was like 2 pages of the different types of aircrafts that we see.
I say, and the like military protocol errors that were made in the episode.
And neither of us are well versed enough in the knowledge of the Air Force specifically to make that interesting for you guys.
And I can't speak for you, but I couldn't care less that they saluted at the wrong time. They did exactly what I expect to see in a military base in fucking 19 whatever.
And I'm sure that in the 50s, people watching at home didn't care.
No.
Like we said this before in other episodes, like it doesn't matter.
No, and I'm telling you right now, somebody sitting there watching the episode in 2020 doesn't fucking care. I can't imagine anybody in the 1950s gave 2 shits about saluting with your hat off, which is apparently a big discrepancy that somebody was real angry about.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And this was very apparent that these notes that random people put on IMDb were not necessarily fact-checked, because I went back through, because there was one in particular when Decker first arrives and he gets out of his 1914 model aircraft. They were all up in airs about the fact that there was like a Jeep and a service van behind his aircraft.
Behind the plane.
And then in the very next frame, when he's walking away, it's no longer there. We went back.
And to be fair, to this person's credit, in the very next frame, it's not there.
It's in the toe corner when the camera still pans.
The very next frame is from a different fucking angle.
Yeah. So they're like, oh, it's gone. That was a discrepancy.
That was a discrepancy in the recording. Burn him at the stake.
So I can give you a very brief synopsis of everything.
Lay it on me. Let's just get the whole synopsis out. We'll discuss what is worth discussing to us after I make some really unpleasant sounds with my microphone to get it where it needs to be so that I stop spiking every time I say a thing. And that's the way the cookie crumbles.
Alrighty then.
Give me that synopsis.
Okay. So Lieutenant Decker, first shot is him in his aircraft in the sky. And the clouds are doing a weird thing. They're moving faster than normal, which I don't know. If you're in the sky and you're watching the clouds, maybe they would move faster. I don't usually look out the window when I'm in an airplane, so don't know. But he's coming through this like thick fog of cloud, and then he says it, like Rod says in his narration, that Decker is incredibly lost. He doesn't know where he is. And then like the very next shot, he's rolling down a runway because he's landed on an Air Force base. And so he's rolling up, and he doesn't seem to be aware of his surroundings until he gets out of his aircraft. So he jumps out, and he's immediately surrounded by, I guess, higher ranking people.
Yeah, I believe it is MPs, specifically. The military police looked like them and some commanding officer of some sort.
Major Wilson. That's where we first see him. That's where he comes in.
Yes, that is where Major Wilson comes
in. So Major Wilson meets him, and he's really, like, disoriented. He doesn't really know where he's at, and he's looking around. And
looks very confused by the surroundings as well.
Yeah.
Which was well done.
Yeah, it was. Spot on for acting. Major Wilson then informs him that he's on an American base, and
after accusing him of being French,
right? Because he's like, "Do you not understand me?" Because he's just like silent in his confusion, and he goes, "No, I'm British," and he didn't understand why his aircraft looked that way, why he was dressed the way he was,
why the Wilson didn't understand. Yeah. While Decker is just like makes it perfectly clear that like, you're American. We didn't know you guys were so advanced.
Well, that was what I'm saying, is Wilson informs him that he's on an American base, and he goes, wow, I didn't know you were so advanced. And another fun fact about that I found, that I'm trying to pull out of here, is that Decker, when he's looking around, he sees a 1950s era jet for the first time. After Wilson informs him that he's on an American base, and he makes that exclamation of, we had no idea you were so advanced. In reality, he should have been surprised that he was on an American base at all, because, especially in France, because at that time, America hadn't declared war yet until, in their timeline, a month after his fictional departure, when he was up in the air. So he realistically, in their timeline, wouldn't have even known that there was an American base. He should have been surprised by that, not so much the aircrafts around him.
Well, I could see somebody being more taken aback by unsuspected futuristic advancements in war technology than maybe the location of a specific base. And I don't know shit about shit on this topic. Like I am a walking bag of lack of information, and that's okay. But I don't know if there were American bases in France already. Like maybe they were prepping for the war. Maybe they were. Maybe there's just no fucking reason for there to be an American base, and where Guadeloupe, who the fuck cares, France? It's hard to say.
Yeah. So Wilson then takes him to see the Major General, and try to figure out, like, okay, what are you doing here? Like, what's the deal? So he goes into the office, and that's where we first see Major General George Harper, and he's sitting behind his desk, and he walks in, right? And he's like, Decker does his like British salute and does the weird foot march thing as he stands in place.
Stomps into attention.
Yep. And
I don't know if that's anything. I said a thing like I knew a thing. I don't know if that's a thing.
So then George Harper, the Major General, kind of looks him up and down. And he has this amazing look on his face. It's sort of like sardonically taking him in. So, like, is there a flight show around? Like, what is this costume you're wearing? He thinks he's a role player.
It is the look that Vernon Dursley would give somebody in cosplay if he saw them in public.
Yeah.
Just a confusion kind of bathed in disgust with a sprinkle of amusement.
Yeah. Yep.
As he attempts to understand
what's happening.
What is happening here.
Yeah. So he tells him like 3 different times, like, this is my uniform. I'm part of the Royal Air Force. And he doesn't believe him.
Understandably, nobody believes this dude. Nobody's going to believe. If I go to work tomorrow, like, hey, sorry guys, I missed work yesterday because I was in 1942. Nobody's going to fucking believe me either. That's fucking ridiculous.
So it's Wilson that asks him, what's the date today? And he says it's March the 5th. And he leans in a little closer to his side and he goes, what year? He goes, well, it's 1914. And then there's a pause and they look at each other and then they look back at him and he goes, isn't it? And he just ominously shakes his head no.
And this is after some discussion regarding World War I and Decker mentioning things that don't fit in the timeline, speaking of things from 40 years ago that they seem to catch on. But it is another fairly amusing moment of the Twilight Zone trying to cram a whole lot of character development into like a 4-minute section of dialogue. And it's one of the better done examples, in my opinion. It doesn't feel as forced as some of them do.
Especially because I think a lot of it is nonverbal.
Yeah, it's a lot of facial expressions and some body language
through like their eyes and how they look at each other, and yes, definitely the body language, and you kind of get it without really knowing what's going on right away. And so they tell him the date, and then they're trying to like figure out, well, what do we do with you now? Like, how do we handle this dude just literally dropped from the sky from 42 years in the past? What do we do? And then there's discussion about the Air Vice Marshal McKay. And
I don't remember how he got brought up, but the conversation eventually turns to Decker.
He was coming for a visit. He was coming.
Oh, that's right. He was on his way to
do like a walkthrough.
Do a walkthrough of the base.
And then Decker says, well, that's not possible. And he's like, how do you know him? And they go back and forth. And he goes, well, I knew him because I was flying with him, and gives this whole backstory about how he and McKay were like surrounded by Germans, and then they got separated, and then he went through the fog, and now he's here. But he is convinced that McKay is dead. Like, he's completely dead because the last he saw, he was surrounded by German aircrafts, and he was leaving to get away.
And oddly enough, their response to him being convinced that McKay is dead is to, in turn, become convinced that he may or may not maybe somewhat be there to assassinate McKay.
Right.
Which is it's just a real weird...
it's a jump in plot.
Oh, maybe just grasping at straws to maintain a grip on reality. I don't know what's going on there, but it was a...
So they put him in a holding cell until they can figure it out. And then Lieutenant Wilson goes to talk with him. And that's when Decker sort of divulges that, like, he's a coward. And he feels so much remorse for leaving him to die because he was always running. He even mentions that, like, he used to shoot holes.
Yeah, with his
gun.
sidearm to make it look as though he had come into contact with Germans.
When he was always running away or flying the opposite direction.
Doing everything he could to avoid combat.
He would fire rounds into the side of his own aircraft so that the, quote, chaps would be impressed.
It really just made me wonder if that's all that odd. Like, I mean, I'm about to veer way the fuck off topic, but
it's okay.
So I've seen interviews with Vietnam vets who admit to being super ashamed of the fact that they intentionally would aim above the heads of their enemies because they didn't want to kill somebody.
Right.
So they would aim above their heads and mow down the tree line in the hopes that they would run away because they didn't want to kill somebody.
Yeah.
I feel like that's not all that far from firing a hole into the sidewall of your jet or your plane.
It's like to save face for one. I don't think for him it was so much of a moral thing as like to be.
I don't mean the morality of the situation. I just mean the blatant, like, not gonna do what I'm here to do.
Right.
Like I'm not gonna.
I think, from my perspective and what I've seen of his character, I think it's more of a thing of him not like being able to come to terms with the fact that he was afraid. He was afraid of being where he was. He didn't want to be there. And
that's certainly his.
He couldn't handle doing his duty, per se. And so he's really struggling with that. And then there's this really nice moment where, like, Lieutenant Wilson takes him aside and goes, they're looking out the window together, and he says, you know, they're like, it's okay to be afraid. Like, everybody's afraid. Like, fear is a human emotion. There's no shame in that. And then they start talking about McKay, and Wilson's sort of in the space, I believe, that he now is like believing that maybe what this guy is saying has some truth to it.
Certainly seems that way.
Just because of all the details that he's providing and all the information and really the emotional state that he's in. And so they get into this conversation, and then Decker suddenly is like, well, I have to go back. Like, if I just go back, I can fix the future. He'll still be alive, and all the people that he saves will still be alive. And all, like, in his brain, he's totally in a different timeline than the guys around him. So he jumps up.
Which arguably he is. It's not just in his brain. He is, in fact,
he's living
a new timeline.
Yeah.
So
he jumps up, and he punches Wilson. He falls over. He goes to rush out the door, and another personnel comes in, and he straight punches him in the gut, and he hits the wall and falls.
Knocks him unconscious.
Dramatically, by a punch in the gut, dude's unconscious. So he runs out, and he's running, and so we get like a good 30 seconds of him just running, and he runs really funny, which is kind of good. That made me smile. So he gets to his aircraft.
Little fucking judgmental, but okay.
It's like a goofy run. We've talked about other characters running.
And I have said far more judgmental things about them.
Thank you.
But you said this one, so it's a little judgmental, but okay. I'll listen.
I'll get you on the next one. It's cool.
Yeah, we'll see if you remember.
Oh, I will. So he gets to his aircraft, and he's trying to get it started, which I didn't know that was a thing. You were the one that told me that they had to, like, actually spin the propeller at the front to, like, make the engine go.
So, to be fair, my knowledge of that is based entirely on seeing it happen in movies and seeing old cars get crank started.
So it could just be a
I
bit
have
of movie
been
magic?
told that it is something akin to bump starting your car. But what the fuck do I know?
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, he tries to get the plane started. He gets into the cockpit, and he's sitting there. And then we see a gun.
Just out of left field, right field, I think.
In his face. Hand on the trigger. Like, the finger is on the trigger, and it's there. And Wilson, is it Wilson? It is Wilson, right? With the gun?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The same Wilson he punched over a table to unconsciousness 30 seconds before he ran across an American military base, flailing his arms and legs trying to find his aircraft that was parked right out in the middle.
So it was a goofy run.
I didn't say that. You said that.
So they have this little spat of him, like, go ahead and shoot me. Like, I'm still going somewhere. And so he takes off. And Wilson goes back, and he's talking to his major general. And the major general is sort of like berating him for, you let the British guy get away, and we don't even know what his intentions were, and yada, yada, yada. And then the Air Vice Marshal McKay comes in. The guy that they've been waiting for this entire episode
for like 23 minutes now
walks in the door. And they get to talking. They give him information that only Decker would have known. And it sort of wraps up with him like going through Decker's things. And I was a little disappointed by the ending, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah. Because
why is that?
It just kind of ended, and I really kind of wanted that redemption piece of him like flying back in time and all of this. And we do get a little bit of that resolution, because as he's sitting there and he tells his side of the story, he says, you know, that he was saved. They were flying together, and then Decker disappeared, and he made it, you know, safely. And so like you do get a little bit of resolution and wrap up, and like they look at each other and like, oh, he did go back in time. He did do it. He did fix it. But then he just goes over to the table and like is picking up his effects. So he has like his passport and his badge and, you know, the stuff that he had on him. And he's going through it. And then they just kind of look out the window and it ends.
Well, they look out the window after specifically saying that that McKay needs to have a seat because they have the personal belongings that the German soldiers should have brought back from Decker.
Oh, I missed
and
that part.
McKay wants to know where in blazes they found Decker's personal effects. And Winston, Winslow, Churchill, big blonde guy that gets knocked out, and then
Wilson.
Thank you, Wilson. The volleyball on a body tells him he needs to sit down, thus implying that they're about to tell McKay the entire story of what just happened with Decker.
Ah, okay.
After McKay explained that Decker came back and saved him from the Germans that he left him to die with.
I didn't make that.
So I mean that in my head it's a pretty solid resolution, because I mean they weren't gonna show us a fucking dogfight over France, like,
right?
Even if they wanted to, which they probably wanted to. They didn't have the fucking budget for that.
Didn't have the resources.
They had the entire fucking San Bernardino Air Force Base.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Tell you. I mean,
yeah, tell me about the setting.
It was shot there.
Well, the setting was supposed to be.
It was supposed to take place at the Lafayette Air Base in Reims, France, but was actually filmed like half an hour north of Hollywood in San Bernardino at the Air Force Base. I don't really know any more about it than that. I mean, there's some information about the Norton Air Force Base being decommissioned and closed in 1994, but oh my God, who fucking cares?
Because now it's the San Bernardino Airport.
I mean...
Cool. Fun facts.
Cool. It used to be an Air Force Base, and now it's an airport.
Yeah.
This shoe used to be a shoe, and now it's a sandal. I just don't give a fuck. I can't. I want to. I want to, because I wish I could get into things like this, but like short of like Saving Private Ryan, where I get to see a man get a fucking K-bar buried into his chest slowly, I just can't get into the pseudo-military Hollywood take on what is essentially a career path for a lot of people.
Especially from the 50s.
Especially from the 50s. Oh my God, what the fuck did you guys know?
Now I'm going to remind you of something.
If you must.
At the top of the episode, you said that this ending was probably one of your favorites.
Yes.
Tell me why.
Because it's completely resolved.
Are you talking
about... It's a
about...
180 resolution that is done in a way that was very well structured for the budget and the time.
Did Serling's end narration have anything to do with your like of the ending?
It had no. Serling's entire... Serling could have taken no part in this episode, and I would have thought exactly as I do.
Sure.
It was one of those that he just... I'm glad he was there. I'm always glad he's there. I'm kind of glad he didn't get in there and try to fucking Twilight Zone it up. I appreciate that it is what it is, and that he didn't get in there and try to make it weirder or try to do something else to it, because I like how it ended.
Stray too far from the original story that Matheson wrote.
Now, with that said, the story itself, as depicted by the Twilight Zone, is rough. It is
It's
slow,
long.
it is monologue-y, it is dialogue-y, and there's not much information shared in either case. But it's a excuse me, it's a seventh note stab
Yeah.
through the entire thing that resolves on that major C, and that major C is a really nice resolve come the end of it. But got to listen to a lot of BS stab to get there.
Sure.
But the resolution is one of my favorite of the first season, and it's only because it is. I can see this episode being stretched out into a novel
Yeah.
without
Easily.
a lot of work,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a nice thing.
It would need a little more colorful descriptions in there for me, I think. Just
Well,
'cause-
yeah, I mean, we didn't have a narrator telling us what was on the screen because we have functional jelly balls.
But like also, I don't know. It was hard for me to sit through because there's just not a lot happening. Like
No, it's a super dull episode.
it feels so much shorter than it is. Like
I thought it felt a lot longer than it was. But
it feels longer is what I meant to say. It feels longer, but it also the story itself wraps up so quickly that like you get it.
Oh yeah, it's out of nowhere.
That's what I was saying.
The resolution comes out of nowhere.
The story just kind of comes in this package deal, but it feels like it's an hour and a half long when you're just sitting watching it. If you're watching it like scene by scene.
Well, I feel like that's part of that. The Twilight Zone has 28 minutes to tell,
A full story.
tell a full story, and you gotta trim the fat somewhere, and it can't always come from the dialogue.
Right.
So, I don't know. I don't take that much issue with it. It's a fine episode. Like it's a fine episode, and if you don't mind sitting through kind of a slog, I think the ending makes it worth it.
And it supposedly
me.
gets better from here. So,
Supposedly.
well, I haven't seen any of the new ones. The ones that come after 18.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what we're going into. Because, guys, honestly, I watch them like the day before we record, if not the day of recording.
Yeah, and I said some stuff last week about the
green
following
screen?
episode.
Yeah.
It was not this episode because I forgot this one existed.
So better things are coming.
Better things are coming, and I'm super disappointed that 18 wasn't actually the episode I was thinking it was because I'm super excited
Do
to
you
see
know
that
which
episode.
one it is?
I don't know the title of any of them. I didn't know the title of any of them until we started this damn podcast.
Oh, fair enough. All right. So I think we've given our favorite moments. You said you liked the ending. You've thoroughly covered that. I don't have a particular favorite moment. I mean,
All right, well, fucking pick something and lie to me then.
it was a thing. Like, it was an episode of the
Nope,
Twilight Zone.
that's a marble rating. I want a favorite moment.
Favorite moment.
Just make something up. Yes, and.
I can't make something up because I just watched it.
Just pick a point in the episode and tell me it's your favorite.
The rando people that we see in the background. So we see a service woman
When he runs out.
twice. The first time
She's my favorite in this episode.
when Lieutenant Wilson takes him in to see the Major General. The first time there's a rando blonde woman in service uniform standing there, and she's just kind of watching them walk. And then when he runs out, when Decker runs back out, there's another airwoman just standing there.
This one is
It's
my
the
favorite one.
only two females that we see in this entire episode, and I didn't even have to make this up. Like, they're just there. They're not even credited. They're just standing there.
I mean, they were extras. So
It's like, guys, way to represent the 50s. That's a good jump.
yeah,
It's good.
could have been worse. They could have had their boobs hanging out.
Hey.
With that said, what's your general takeaway?
For what they had to work with in giving us a full story in the time, I really like the way that the writer, Richard Matheson, packaged it. Because you do see that, and it's made more clear when we get his explanation of
Certainly.
why Decker did what he did. And then we get the end resolution of both sides of the story, essentially. Like, it makes more sense if you're coming at it from that angle. So the general takeaway of I am more satisfied with the ending of this episode because he did go back and rectify the things that were haunting him. Like, he realized he could make a difference, and he went back and he did it. And I like that.
Fair play. Give it a rating.
I gave it a rating. I jumped ahead, so what's your marble rating?
What rating did you give it?
So it's an episode. I'm going to give it a 2, despite all the good things we've been
It's
saying.
an episode is a 3.
Okay, fine. It's 3 then.
I mean, you can give it a 2. We just got to remember what 2 was, because 1 is Netflix is on Rod this month.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2 is... I always forget number 2.
We need to make a list and just put it here.
Yeah. Number 3 is... Wow, it's an episode of Twilight Zone.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very meh for me.
It's very meh?
Yeah.
So you're giving it a 2 or a 3?
I'm going to give it a 2.
You can give it a 2.
We're going to call 2 meh now.
You can call them meh.
Because we don't remember. So,
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So for episode 18, 2 is meh.
Yeah.
And for the marble rating, I am going to go ahead and say that it takes more than a coat of polish on a turd to make a turd not a turd, and a nice wrap-up ending does not make a good episode.
So?
I'm giving it a 2.
Fair enough. That's a total of 4 marbles for this episode.
It's a good ending. That was number 2, is I won't be doing this again. I won't be sitting through this again.
Yeah.
But I prefer meh. So this is a
We
meh
could combine
and a
those.
meh for a total marble rating of 4.
Yeah.
Goddamn, sorry guys.
It's okay. It's okay. It's going to get better.
Where can the people find us?
They can find us at WWCast on the Twitter.
On the Twitter, yes.
Uh-huh.
That place you go to tweet things.
And is it wonderwithuscast@gmail.com?
It's wwucast@gmail.com
Okay.
if you want to
do the
email us.
I don't do the email. So.
You can find Bethany at It's Bethany. It's underscore.
Yes.
Sorry,
Don't
it's
forget
underscore Bethany. No apostrophe, but an underscore. And you can find me at Connor Dare. That's KONRDARE. Again, you can find us at WWUcast. You can email us at wwucast@gmail.com. We got a Facebook page.
It's
For
Wonder with
some
Us.
reason. And I'm going to try to figure out an Instagram.
Yeah.
I think when we record, we should start taking pictures of our glorious
selfies?
setup up here.
Yeah, I like that.
Just like hey,
Give you guys an in
we're
the
still
studio
doing
look.
it. I mean, we can't do that right now because the studio's a fucking mess.
It is. It is a mess.
Oh my god.
We're sitting at a table in the middle of a room, guys.
I mean, to be fair, it used to be a proper studio,
Once upon a time.
and then it was a proper wood shop,
And now it's kind of a
and
collaboration.
now it's kind of all of it, and it doesn't work. I can't run a saw in here. There's too much equipment.
Yeah.
It's so sensitive to sawdust, guys.
So when we get our studio all pretty, we'll send you guys an in the studio
We're gonna
picture.
get some pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. I'm not
Also-
gonna bug anybody about the other things.
Can I make a note real quick?
It depends on the note.
The fact that my Twitter handle has no apostrophe really bothers you, doesn't it?
No,
Because you've said it every time.
I say it to clarify.
It has an underscore. It doesn't have an apostrophe.
Yeah, I say it to clarify it. So if people go to tweet at you, they can actually tweet at you, because if they just put the apostrophe, the tweet won't go to you.
That's true. There are
So I
there are a lot
clarify
of
because it's
there are a
it
lot
needs
of
clarification.
Bethany's in the Twitterverse I found, which is why there's an
there's a lot of-
underscore and no
there's a lot of-
apostrophe.
Bethany's on Earth. So yeah.
Yeah.
There's more Connors with my spelling than I like to admit, too, and several of them are musicians. It makes my life slightly inconvenient on occasion.
Just a little. Well, guys, if you have the time, go on the iTunes. Give us a rating. He didn't want to say it, so I said it. If you don't want to, that's fine. Just send us a message. Let us know you're listening.
We've been asking for 32 episodes. I figured I'd give you guys a break. You're welcome.
We'll give you a break on the next one, promise.
I make no such promise, because next time I'm going to want to remind you.
That's fair. All right.
Let's get that sign off. Let's get the fuck out of here.
Thank you for wondering with us. I've been Bethany.
I'm still Connor. We'll
Have
see
a
you
good
next
night.
time. Man, we can't do it over each other. You go first.
Have a good night.
We'll talk